So this is the agenda for today's meeting. We're going to give a brief historical background about the situation in Syria, about the uprisings. We're going to focus on field hospital. We're going to explain where did the field hospital idea come from and how it was born. And then medical relief organizations, their relationship with the medical care delivery inside opposition-controlled areas, and then the medical mapping project, which is my project for the independent study. So this is the map of Syria here. In normal circumstances, you'd say, wow, this is the cradle of civilization. But unfortunately, now you look at it and you say, wow, it's a rough neighborhood. So hopefully, we'll go back to where we were before. So this is a timeline. And the major milestones in the timeline, we had our independence from France in 1946. The Ba'ath Party takes power in 1963. But during that period of time, the economy was booming in Syria. There was a little bit of interruption of failed attempt for union with Egypt, but the economy overall was booming from until that time. When the Ba'ath Party took power, it really halted the progress in the economy at that time. The output for manufacturing and agriculture in that year dropped by more than half. And it took us a while to recover, and I don't think we ever recovered from that. Assad, the father, takes power in 1970, before I was born, and then he was president until after I left Syria, in 2000 when he died. And then, naturally, his son became president. During that time, during these 30 years of presidency, there was a clash with the Muslim Brotherhood where they had a rebellion and ended up with the Hama massacre. The rebellion was put out by surrounding and bombing the fourth largest city in Syria, Hama, and we had about 20 to 30,000 casualties at that time. And that was the last time anybody dared to challenge the authority there until we got to the Syrian Revolution in March of last year. One extra point here, that there was some economical recovery here between 2000 after this president came into power. He allowed for some economical progress within limits, basically. It was really directed, that economical progress was directed to help the elite, basically, and to solidify, add more economical power to the regime on top of the military and security power that they have. So this is the city of Daraa, a small city, about 100,000, and a marginal city at that time. That's where the protest started in response to arrest and torture of a dozen school children at that time. We can talk offline about more details about how this happened. And then between this and this, when March, the protest started, it was really weekly protest on the weekend. Then on the weekdays, it was back to normal life. But they continued every weekend until we got to the Independence Day, April 17th, in Homs. This is the third largest city. What was different around at that time is that people they occupied the major square there, peacefully occupied it, and they spent the night there. And then the early hours in the morning, the regime sent their forces and they showered them with AK-47s. We had about 200 casualties. So that was a turning point. Before that, people were calling for reforms. After this here, they were not calling for reforms anymore. They were calling for the fall of the regime. And the situation escalated after that. In July, the city of Hama itself, nobody believed that this can happen after the massacre in 1982, that they would ever stand up. And you had hundreds of thousands, actually, people going to the streets. So that was an ominous sign to the regime that things have changed. So they put it down militarily. They sent the army here with tanks and everything, and they put this down, militarily. And that led to the revolution, the uprising, moving from peaceful protest, unfortunately, into an armed rebellion. So that military takeover of these areas that pushed us into an armed rebellion where we're at right now. Um, so this is the timeline for the protests. We went through these steps already right now. You know, the Free Syrian Army that formed from officers and soldiers who defected from the regime. They didn't want to shoot at their own people, so they defected. They started forming units, and then they gradually started protecting protesters. Then they started protecting their towns. Then they had clashes with the regime, which we will talk more about briefly, though. The Syrian National Council was formed in 2011. Then there was a critical point here in February of 2012. There was a resolution about Syria in the UN that was blocked by China and Russia, the governments of China and Russia. And after that, the regime really escalated its crackdown, and we started having more casualties. Up until that point, we would get 20 to 30 casualties a day was the average. At that time, we started seeing 50 to 70 a day. So between February and August, the escalation of violence was dramatic. And also the growth of the rebel forces or the Free Syrian Army forces was also dramatic. And they moved from a defensive position into an offensive position here when they tried to take the city of Aleppo. The city of Aleppo is the second largest city. It's the manufacturing heart of the country. And we'll talk about that further, the implications. But they were not able to take it. They took half of it, and they were in a stalemate right now. And it led to the regime using military jets, which further escalated the health situation, the public, the casualties. After that, we're dealing with 150 to 200 casualties a day. This is the city of Homs. That's what we ended up with. Homs was punished the most, and you could see on the upper hand corner here, even Red Crescent, even ambulances were not spared. So what was the situation with the healthcare system before the uprisings? We had basically two systems. We had the public healthcare system consisting of the Ministry of Health, large hospitals, smaller hospitals as well, along with the university hospitals, including my own university hospital. They provide free care to the population. The quality of the care can be low at times. I mean, you don't know what you're gonna get, basically. So you have the private sector. If you can afford it, you can go to the private hospitals, where you can get a better quality care, but you pay cash for it. So a lot of people can't afford it. The clinics are generally private, where you pay for it, but they're usually affordable. Usually people are able to go to clinics in general. The Red Crescent, which is has a relationship with the International Red Cross, a very limited role before these the uprisings. So I will talk first about how was care delivery before we ended up in an armed rebellion. During the peaceful protests, there's a problem here. If you're an activist or if you're a protester and you get shot at by the government, and if you try to go to a public hospital, you may get arrested, you may get killed. So it wasn't safe to go there. If you try to go to a private hospital, they may refuse you, because if they accept you, they may get retaliation from the regime. They may put themselves at danger. So you try to ask your neighbor, a doctor that you know, to take care of you. They put themselves at risk, because if the regime finds out they're treating civilians, or especially activists, they're putting their life in danger. And then, as a result of that, we have more than 100 doctors so far have been killed. We don't know the exact number, but well over 100 doctors have been killed by the regime. So that led to the birth of the field hospitals. I'm going to show you a video here about field hospitals. This was here, just to clarify, this was here in a 2-week period when the regime allowed CNN and other media outlets to go into Syria. For about a week or 2 weeks, then they blocked them, then they kicked them out. It was a part of a Congressman Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich. They tried to do a media campaign for him by allowing this to happen. It didn't work out for them, so they kicked out the media after that. Not sure why it's.
But with ominous words of caution to be careful of the armed gangs. They're chanting a peaceful people from this massive and serious.
Okay.
We ended up right in the midst of the demonstration, having broken away from the rest of the media and our government escort. So they remained concerned. So that's our government minders that are telling me that we need to return right away because, again, they're claiming that it's not safe. We took it upon ourselves to take the risk, despite the government warning. The security forces pulled out in the last few days, we are told. The military perched up in the terrace. And on a banner, a message to them. Please, shoot us with rubber bullets. Quite different to what happened here in the Damascus neighborhood of Gaza last week, where the demonstrators say 5 people were killed. We see bullet holes in a number of buildings, and then we briefly meet a man who tells us in a hushed voice that his 27-year-old son was killed weeks ago. We come across a man who identifies himself as a doctor.
I want to show you the field hospital that we have here.
You set up a field hospital. When did you set that up?
We had a coordinating for the month after we organized a leader. This is the only way to treat injured demonstrators.
How many injured have you had in this neighborhood?
Like last week we have like 4.
The field hospital is nothing more than a tiny room where many bled to death on the floor. The doctor helped us to save them. But he says people are afraid to go to government hospitals.
They refuse to go to the government hospital because they will be arrested, and if they die, we can't take their body. After we their family come and make a signature that they are armed troops, gunshots.
The government denies that allegation. But it's the government that the few hundred gathered here believe lies repeatedly when they want removed from power.
So what he said here actually, and this is him actually, the one, you saw that how he was hiding his identity. You couldn't see his face. You could see the bottom. And this is actually him. The ones who are familiar with what's going on in Syria, they recognize the face. He became the face of the movement of the doctors who challenged the authority. That's his name. So, I mean, he paid a heavy price for this. At some point, he realized that the government is after him. So he went into hiding in homes and friends' homes, and then that was also continued to be risky. So at that time, there were no safe zones in Syria where you could under the control of the Free Syrian Army. So the only way to escape was to go outside the country. And as he was going his way to Turkey, they shot at him, and of course he died. Ibrahim Osman. He's a graduate from my med school. He was a third-year orthopedic surgery resident at the time. So how is medical care in government-controlled areas right now? We went through how it was during the peaceful protest phase. So after that, how is it like in the government-controlled areas? The government-controlled areas now, they're getting under heavy military pressure by the Free Syrian Army. So increasingly, they're getting overwhelmed with their own casualties from the security forces. So if you're an injured civilian, you're next in line, and also you're still a suspect. They may think that you're an activist if you show up there. The Red Crescent, the restrictions on the movement of the Red Crescents are just tremendous. They're really not able to do a whole lot. And they got shot at many times by the government. You saw that one of their ambulances was destroyed. They mainly right now provide some basic medical chronic disease aid to the internally displaced people, basically. But not a whole lot beyond that. and you have 2.5 million internally displaced. You have a public health crisis on hand, especially now when the weather is getting cold and there's shortage in electricity and fuel. And chronic disease management is really, we're heading towards a disaster. So I brought up here Aleppo. Aleppo is the second largest city. That's what I was talking about. The rebels start to take it and make it their base so that they can go towards the rest of the country. They were able to take this eastern side. The regime still controls this side. And you see the beltway here is still under the control. Most of it is controlled under the control of the regime, including the airport. But what happened here, there was a miscalculation by the Free Syrian Army, I have to say, is that they were too confident they were going to take the city. They didn't really prepare for the possibility that the city is going to be divided. Because what happens here, as you see here, this is a huge industrial city. I mean, it's half of the size of Aleppo almost. It's a huge industrial complex that houses most of the medical supplies manufacturing, the pharmaceutical manufacturing. So it's a big problem here because it's completely shut down right now. So it creates more barriers to care delivery. So opposition-controlled areas, what's the care like? So you have the public and the private hospital that existed before, and they continue to operate whenever and wherever they're able to operate. Sometimes they are in risky zones where it's very difficult to operate. And the private hospitals are providing free care, where prior to that they used to charge for care. I mean, in return, they're getting supplies for free from relief organizations outside Syria. So that's the deal that was made between the relief organizations outside Syria and private hospitals inside, that we want you not to charge for care, and we'll provide you with supplies. We'll compensate you, basically. And that still holds, that still stands. Supply lines sometimes are dangerous. The doctors, there's a steep decline in the number of doctors. A lot of them fled, especially from Aleppo. But they have some local doctors who stayed. They have expatriate doctors, like myself, like Syrian American doctors who go there and help. And you have doctors from Arab and foreign countries as well. But there is a huge demand. The supply is way, way less than the demand. And there's really no tertiary centers in opposition-controlled areas. They have small hospitals, but they're not able to provide tertiary care. So tertiary care really means that you go to Turkey. Sometimes that means that hours of delay until you get to Turkey. A lot of lives are lost just trying to get to Turkey. And then chronic disease, of course, because you're overwhelmed with war-related injuries. So how about the Syrian refugees? I'm going to talk here only on the Syrian refugees in Turkey. There are about 500,000 Syrian refugees outside of the country. 200,000 are in Turkey. About half of them live in refugee camps. So the ones who live in refugee camps, they're taken care of by the Turkish government. They provide everything, including medical care. The ones who are outside, they can, if they get any emergency, they can go to the Turkish hospitals and they can get emergency care there. But once they are stabilized, relatively stabilized, they are discharged, and then post-acute care facilities that are all owned and operated by Syrian expatriates take care of the post-acute care. And we're going to see one of these facilities there. Red Cross, I mean, pretty much your usual players in this kind of situations are pretty much absent. There's some funding, some small funding from some of USAID and some other organization from Europe, but very minimal. All this is funded by Syrian expatriates, actually. Go ahead.
So the Red Cross and UN are absent even in Turkey?
Yeah, because the Turkish government told them that we're going to take care of the population. I mean, they took that stand, which is appreciated also, but they're not able to adapt to the situation. Like, for example, the Red Cross, International Red Cross, they send all their support to the Red Crescent inside the government-controlled areas, which is really they're not able. They're providing some supplies in areas that doesn't have the highest demand. The highest demands are in the areas where you have the fighting. So that's a situation that I don't think they've encountered before. So they still hasn't adapted to it.
Do you have any insight why the Turkish government says no to that?
They wanted to take care of the problem themselves. I'm not. So far, they've taken that stand that we're going to take care of the problem. Yeah. So I go on my trip to Turkey. We get the green light to adopt this project as an independent study. I start gathering information, and then I start contacting US-based Syrian American relief organizations. It took a while until they let me in. You know, there is a security reason here. They they want to trust you before they will let you in because their lives online here. So finally, they let me in, and I started joining a weekly Skype calls. So in those weekly Skype calls, one of the organizations, there are a few of them, but one of them, they have weekly Skype calls where you have doctors/organizers in Turkey, in Syria, in Europe, in the US, different places. They join in, and then they set up the plan for moving forward. Where are we going to send the supplies? How are we going to get supplies? Let's set up training. They do, for example, training for doctors and nurses inside Syria by, bringing them from Syria into Turkey, then training them there, then sending them back. So a lot of things that can be done on these Skype calls, and it was eye-opening, actually. So I go to Turkey first, and most of my time is spent here. This is where most of the action is going on. Two of the refugee camps are located there, and a lot of the organizations, the relief organizations, have offices around that area. And also, as we're going to see in the next slide, the adjacent area of Syria are under the control of the opposition. And right now, it's beyond that. Actually, they moved beyond that even. So that made sense for me to go to that area. So initially, this is Antakya, or Antioch, for the ones who are familiar with the Christian history in the Middle East. This is an Antioch, or Antakya. This is here, Rehanli. It has a refugee camp, and it also has a headquarters for one of the relief organizations, one of the big relief organizations there. Then I go into Syria, I cross the borders, and I go in and I spend the night. And I visit a field hospital, a private hospital, and I spend a day with the people there. And then I go back into Turkey to go to the other side of the border because there's some activity when it comes to medical relief in that area of Turkey as well. So on the first stop, this is here what we see. This is one of those post-acute care facilities that we talked about. At some point, this housed about 50 post-acute care patients. And these are the beds that you see here. But there was some pressure to close that facility, so it was shut down. There was some pressure on the Turkish government, but there is some, right now they're lobbying to try to open it back. There's some complicated demographics there that spilled from Syria into Turkey. We can discuss that if we have time, that caused this issue here. But so far, the Turkish government has been cooperative, though. So this building here turned into a place for an office and a training facility. So here, when I was there, they were training on using this ventilator. So doctors and nurses from Syria came in. We trained them. One of my friends, who's an intensivist, trained them on using this ventilator, and we sent them with ventilators and set up for telemedicine. So the next stop was going into Syria itself, Idlib province, right next to the Turkish border. So in the first day, I was just, this is my first picture in that part of Syria. This gentleman here is a member of a self-governing council. Because the government is absent here, the government is out. So what people there, what they've done is that they formed their own governing council to run their business there. So he escorted us actually and gave us a tour of the area. The next day was the Eid, which is a holiday. It's a Muslim holiday. I had the pleasure of spending the first day with this family. They gave me a room where I spent the night, and they fed me and everything. So they feel like they're a new family. And this gentleman in the middle is a media person there who I'm in contact with via Skype also weekly on some projects he's working on. And this is kind of a higher view of that area there. It's agricultural. It's on the foot of the mountains. And it was abandoned by the regime because it did not produce that area historically did not produce that many loyalists to the regime, and it produced many opponents over the years. So you see there it's underserved, underdeveloped. This is the field hospital. That day actually we visited it. This is a doctor here from Egypt. That specific hospital was the Egyptian doctor union adopted this. They committed to provide staffing to this hospital, a specific field hospital, continuously. So they rotate. They always have 4 surgeons providing care in that specific hospital. And you see here the sign here. See the combination right now that's going on there. You see the governing council member. You see the local rebel unit member. They're running business together, and this is a sign from Egypt saying this field hospital is a present from the Egyptian people to the Syrian people. This is just, they didn't let me take that much picture because they've seen, this is the first time I see them. So they don't let you, there's security reasons. If they are known, if their location is disclosed, the regime can bomb them. So I took a picture of the lab. This is their lab. So what's amazing about that hospital, they showed me, this is Wednesday, October 24th. This is documentation of patients, what they've done on that day. So this lower case here, this is a major trauma patient. This is a patient that can only be taken care of if you're in Connecticut at Yale, maybe. I mean, this is a major trauma patient with 3 different surgical specialties in that field hospital, in that basement, where it lasted for 6 hours, and they've transfused 6 to 8 units of blood at that time, something like that. What's amazing about that, they did that without having a lab, a real lab. You saw their lab. They couldn't check hemoglobin. They couldn't check kidney function, electrolytes. They did all this clinically, 100% clinically. The only equipment they have in that lab are related to blood transfusion, so they can test for HIV, hepatitis, do type and cross. So, I mean, the real heroes. So the next day I visited a private hospital on the way back to Syria. So that was supposed to be a ceasefire day. It was the first day of the holiday, and there was supposed to be a ceasefire that was brokered by the UN envoy to the area. But a rebel unit there gets ambushed, fighting ensues, and then there was shelling that was indiscriminate shelling of another town. So a shell lands in a home, and 5 females get injured. 3 teenagers and 2 middle-aged women, all females for some reason. So you see, I mean, the kind of chaos at that time, and that, if I'm gonna publicize this presentation, I would hide these faces, of course. I mean, these doctors operate under aliases. And then they realized that 4 of them they can't handle. They have severe injuries. They put them in an ambulance, which is really not an ambulance here. If you look at it, it's really a van. So they put them in this van to send them to Turkey, and Turkish border was about 10 minutes away. So that's what happened at that time. That person was dead, actually, that you see on the floor, unfortunately. So I looked at what happened here because I have an encounter. They put them in the van, they send them to the border towards Turkey, and that was at the same time I'm going there. So I witnessed exactly what happened, actually, firsthand what happened in these situations. So here's where the injury happened. Here's where the bombing happened. And this is where the private hospital. And you see here, this is the Turkish border. This is Turkey, this is Syria. So they took these small roads. These are not highways. So it takes a while to get there. And then they put them on an ambulance, and then they go to the Turkish border, to the border crossing. So at that time, it's not an easy pass there. What happened, there are some procedures. The police gonna come and check them. They're gonna try to check identities. They're gonna examine injuries, their custody. There's a procedure that takes some time. And then after that, they decide they need emergency care. So they call in ambulances from the next town, which is a small town, maybe like 50,000 people. So they send ambulances here. And they take them to this hospital. In that hospital, they examine them. They may decide that these are severe injuries. We need tertiary center. So they put them back in the ambulance, and they send them to the next big town, which is Antakya or Antioch here. So you can imagine how many people died on this trip. And unfortunately, when I get to the border, I see those same people. I go there and I find them there because we drove at the same time. And I see these girls there, and one of them was practically dying in front of us. What's really tragic about the situation, if you look at where they came from here. This is just outside of Aleppo. If it wasn't for the war, if it wasn't for all the things that are going on right now, they're only 5 minutes from the university hospital. They're only 5 minutes from the tertiary hospital for northern Syria. But it's not safe to go here. They may get killed, who knows, because they're coming from a suspect area for under control of the rebels. If they try to go to the eastern side, where the rebels, that's under the rebel control, it takes hours because they have to go into the small roads, so they get sent on this kind of a trip. Anyway. And that's one day. I only spent one night there, and I saw all this. So let's call these areas the liberated areas. The areas are under control of the Free Syrian Army. So you have the public and private hospitals. Sometimes they're able to operate, sometimes they're not. One of the problems, too, is that some of these big multi-level public hospitals, they have a strategic importance in war because a lot of times they are the highest building in the town. So the army, the regime army, they go and they set up snipers and they make them a military camp, actually, because they're if you think about hospitals here, a lot of times the biggest building, the tallest building is your hospital. So some of these are gone, some of them are destroyed. Then the field hospitals, what's the difference between field hospitals and medical point? Pretty much a field hospital, we call it a field hospital if they're able to do surgery and house some patients. While medical points, if they're able to provide some emergency care, but they're not able to provide surgeries. So this is a story here. I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm going to speed through this, actually. But this is a hospital in Aleppo that was bombed just a little over a week ago. And this was a field hospital that was flattened around the time that I was there. But for the interest of time, we're going to move forward. These are the lifeline of the medical facilities in Syria, in the opposition-controlled areas. These are the Syrian organizations. The first two are based in the US. This one here is based in the Gulf countries, all Syrian expatriate doctors, basically. And this one here tried to unify all of, and they included some organizations in Europe, in Canada, other countries as well. And this became now the biggest organization. The Qatar Red Crescent acts like it's a small Red Cross. They have missions in Somalia. They have missions in other countries as well. And then Doctors Without Borders and like the Egyptian doctors that we talked about, they provide mainly staffing. So if we think about the situation, it's a pretty emotional situation here. But if we try to take the emotions out of it and we think about it, what are the inputs, what are the constraints to moving forward if we want to rebuild the system, if we want to figure out a healthcare system in these areas that's going to work. The inputs, you have a surplus of doctors. There are three Syrian doctors in this room here. So we produce a lot of doctors in Syria. But right now we have a shortage. So how can we tap to this? You have a population that's very educated, and you have tech-savvy youth. The tech-savvy youth are the ones who are able to start these uprisings and keep them alive. If they were not tech-savvy, these uprisings would have been smashed a long time ago. You have educated and motivated diaspora, or a lot of doctors, as we mentioned. You have medical relief organizations that are motivated and they want to help. And you're able to have access to these areas, a lot of these areas, through Turkey. And then supply lines, they are dangerous, but you have some protection by the rebels at this point here right now. It's more stable in these areas where you have some protection of supply lines. And then although governments are not doing anything, but the world population, there's a lot of sympathy out there. So these are the inputs, but what are the constraints? It's the most dangerous place to practice medicine, of course. The locations that are in the highest need are the most dangerous ones. usually we try to pool resources, we try to pool staffing. Here it's not gonna work. You can't pool resources and staff because you pool everybody, whether it's patients, doctors, equipment, supplies in one place, gets bombed by the government. I mean, it's a huge loss, so you have to unpool. Military environment, and when I talk to doctors there, they start talking about the military updates. They give you the military updates before they give you the healthcare related updates because they're so interrelated. They become, I mean, these doctors back home in these areas, they become military experts. I mean, if you talk to them right now. And then there's a lot of unpredictability in the sources. Sometimes they dry up. You know, people donate and donate, but sometimes there's donation fatigue where they can run short on resources, relief organizations. Communication disruptions. Yesterday, the regime shut down the internet for the whole country. These areas, usually, like the area that I went to, it doesn't have internet or phones to begin with. But they use satellite phones, they use satellite internet. And then they're still in a reactive mode. It's really hard to get out of the reactive mode. So what came out, the innovations that came out from these inputs and these constraints, you know, we talked about the field hospital. That's an innovation. Unpooling, we also talked about that. Contingency plans. I mean, they always have some kind of contingency plans if they get bombed. Either to go to the school next door, go to the cultural center, go to the mosque, the church. I mean, they have one amazing contingency plan I heard from one of the people we trained on using the ventilators. They are a small village in a mountainous area. So the contingency plan was taken them to the natural caves. So they took a patient, they had a patient with the chest tubes, bilateral chest tubes, who had hemothorax, bleeding inside the chest cavity. And they heard about a impending bombing of the hospital. So they carried that patient to the natural cave for a few hours. I mean, just amazing what they're doing. I mean, just this thing. Aliases. I mean, all these doctors were, I don't know the names of them. Even some of the ones who are in the relief organizations, they use fake names. They keep some critical resources in the periphery. De facto no-fly zones. They figured out the regime is not going to bomb an area that's right at the border because there were some incidents where some shells landed in Turkey, some Turkish citizens died. So Turkey retaliated. So the regime stays about 2 to 5 miles, maybe 2 to 3 miles off of the border. So now they're building hospitals right at the border. So, I mean, what can you do? And shared staffing, so you can move around staffing, although you can't 100% pull them. And then, like we said, we train them in Turkey. You can't train them in Syria because you gather 20 doctors to train them, and then you get bombed, you're in trouble. And then use of telemedicine and internet. The Aleppo, I'll see if I have time to talk about Aleppo when you get to that. So here's a scenario that I encountered when I was there. I sat there in the office of that relief organization, and I saw the interaction that's going on. If you're a field hospital in Syria, you're getting close to running short on supplies. So what do? You call one organization, but you're not sure if they're going to respond. So you know somebody in the other one, but you know these people, a CEO. Also, I have a friend there, so let's call them as well, ask them for the same supplies. So, but SEMA, they have a lot of money. Maybe we'll try SEMA also as well. So a lot of time gets wasted on trying to get supplies this way. And they haven't gotten out of this mode because you can't blame them. They're still in a reactive mode. They're not in the mode to do a supply chain project there. So what happens here, a lot of time gets wasted on these transactions. Some hospitals get supplies from multiple resources, so they get too much supplies. Some of them end up in shortages and stockouts. One specific hospital ran out of gas. I mean, so there's some big problem. So if we think from a business perspective, you know, we're in a school of management, and we're thinking as if, again, let's try to take the emotions away and think about it as a business model. So from an economic standpoint, we saw how supplies sometimes are not matching demand because some of the supplies are concentrated in the areas where the hospitals have more connections. They know more people, they're getting more supplies. It's not according to demand. So there's a supply and demand mismatch. When the demand is more than supply, you pay a heavy price. The heavy price here is lives, actually. When the supply is more than the demand, you don't realize the value of the supplies that you have, of the inventory that you have. From an operation standpoint, they're variable degrees of utilization because the location of the facility sometimes does not correlate with where the need is, and you end up with staff, you end up with equipment that's not utilized that well. And if you ask Art, where is the low utilization? You have unused capacity. So he will tell you also high utilization other places, you have long queue lines. So long queue lines, in this specific example, you're losing lives as well. So I'm going to do more of the operations. From an operations standpoint also, I mean, you have inventory EOQ. First years are clueless right now, but nice. but you will learn that from Art in the operations engine class. So we're ending up with stockouts, and they're costly. And we end up with overage as well. Overage can be costly as well. If you have too much supply and you get bombed, you lose too many supplies. So from an employee perspective, these guys are burning out when they're spending that much time trying to figure out who really needs in supply. I mean, it's very, very stressful situation to be a doctor organizer in Turkey for the Syrian Relief Organization. Some were saying I want to have a less stressful life by going to a field hospital. So, I mean, it's really stressful to try to organize this. So the medical mapping project, my project what I suggested, these are the elements of that I suggested to improve the delivery and quality of care there. So we need a comprehensive database, and we want to put it on the map. So we know every location, how many hospitals does it have, how much staff, what kind of equipment, what kind of capacity, how many beds, and put them on the map, and we have a complete database, basically. We should have a basic registry. I mean, it's nice that the Egyptian doctors wrote that thing on that paper, on that piece of paper, but we need something that accounts for every patient, basically. At least basic information, date of birth and gender, that's all. And we don't have to have the names. And then single channel for supply lines. No matter who you know, no matter if you're a field hospital, there is one location to send requests. And we will take care of you. And all the relief organizations will go there and see who's in need and send it, take care of it, instead of the mess that's going on. And then this year they thought that was too ambitious. But what I thought we should have is that universal inventory management. So at any point, you can look at your data, you can access the computer, and you see every specific hospital, how much inventory do they have? And then set up a threshold. They go to a certain threshold, automatically it triggers an order for supplies. You can play up and down with this, you can go up and down with this threshold depending on how much military activity going on. So it's not going to be accurate 100%. It's probably, there may be a week or lag, few days or a week lag, which is okay. It's better than now where we're trying to guess. Let's try to guess how much that hospital had. So that's the case that I built to them for building that medical mapping project, is that we're improving this distribution, preventing overage and stockouts. We're optimizing staffing according to the need. We are, these relief organization staff that they're spending half of their time on the phone, we can free them to do more productive tasks, actually. And then whenever we want to have an expansion plan, whether we're going to expand existing facilities or we're going to add more facilities, we have more data to guide us how we're going to do this. And then fundraising, and like I said, the fundraising has been really from people like us, like Syrian expatriates. So there's lack of funding from large NGOs, from large government, and part of it is that we don't have really data. We show them pictures, we tell them stories, but we don't have actual data about what we're doing, and that will help tremendously. So the documentation, these are reasons to do the documentation, meaning the registry. Kind of the same themes that we've seen in the previous one. But here I want to add at the end is that future consolidation. Because at some point we're going to need to start thinking which one of these facilities we're going to shut down. These are field hospitals. Some of them are in basements, some of them in a school. which one is going to shut down? What's going to happen with these equipments? Are they going to become part of a public hospital? Are we going to give them to a private hospital because they helped out? Which one we're going to build actually around it a real hospital? So all this is going to, at some point, we're going to get to make these decisions. And we need real data about how many patients you're getting, how much need is around you to get to this point. Some of these hospitals that are going to be built right at the border, what are we going to do with these hospitals? So we're going to keep that in mind, and this data, to collecting the data, we're going to help us. And then transitioning, hopefully, as the war winds down, we're going to be transitioning the focus from war-related injuries to chronic disease, and having the data to know where to direct your resources is going to be important. So what we're doing right now, when we're still in the early stages of implementing this project, is that we're going to have a committee that meets on Skype to oversee the project. We're going to hire paid observers to go around to implement the data collection, help the hospitals inside to use the tools that we're going to give them, and then ensure that everybody is being fair, nobody's exaggerating. And we're going to need some information technology support to figure out some tools and to maintain whatever tools, whatever IT tools that we use. And the timeline that we have, the timeline that I suggested in the proposal, was the first stage is to communicate with the hospital inside, share the plan, and get some feedback, and help to build on the second stage, where baseline data collection. And we're going to start with a small region first. We're going to test it with the pilot and learn from the mistakes, maybe adjust the tools that we have, and then expand it beyond to the rest of the opposition-controlled Syria, probably at some point the rest of Syria. And then we're going to use the data to analyze it and give it back to the relief organizations to build on it future decisions. The fourth stage is still ambitious. They think it's too ambitious right now, but we'll keep it in mind right now. I mean, if we're able to do these three stages and then do the fourth stage, we will be making history, I think. It would be pretty ambitious. So this is a sneak peek on what the data that we're collecting. And this is just a primitive. This is just a spreadsheet. We're asking each hospital, we're doing location, facility, staff, equipment, patient data. And how many numbers of beds do you have? How many ICU beds, meaning a ventilator or ICU capacity? Do you have a ventilator? Do you have water? Do you have a reliable water supply, power supply to have a power generator? Are you connected to the internet? Some of these places are not connected to the internet. So, and that's going to be a start, basically. So.